we'll have you come back up, at which time you'll have 5 minutes to respond to any questions or points that they made.
Okay.
Would you go ahead and state your names for us?
Mike Gregory.
Mary.
Okay, make yourselves comfortable. You've got up to as much as 20 minutes.
Take that long. History on the situation. We bought a property in the country, 24 acres, very peaceful, very quiet. Built a new home. It was very peaceful, very quiet. Last fall, the barking started. I got my vehicle. Now I'm down onto the west side of Mr. Staples' property, and the wind is predominantly from the west, so it carries all the sound from the dogs toward my property. When I drove by and looked, I counted 8, but to find out there were 17 dogs there. No protective sound barrier or anything around it. They would run and bark continuously off and on all day. So I called the zoning board to find out if it was a kennel. And after talking to the zoning board, they said, no, if you have 3 or more dogs, you have to have a kennel license. So they recommended that I call the sheriff and file a complaint. I didn't want to file a complaint on a neighbor, so I asked the sheriff, please go talk to him, ask him to quiet the dogs down. I don't care if he's got 100 of them, I just don't want to hear the barking all the time. So nothing happened. I waited 2 weeks. I called the sheriff again. Said, please don't write a citation. Just let him know that we're getting tired of hearing all the barking. Nothing happened again. So I called the 3rd time. They went and I filed a complaint. They wrote a warning and left a copy of the ordinance. The next day was worse than ever. So I called again. And they went back out again. And then it got quiet. I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks. Now, slowly but surely, it's all started again with the barking and the noise. I've called the prosecutor's office. He suggested I file a civil suit. I'm tired of calling the sheriff. They've got better things to do than run back and forth about some little piddly issue like this. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't understand it's going to be fully enclosed. If I don't hear the barking, I don't care how many dogs are there. It's the barking that I don't think I should have to listen to when there was 17 dogs there and there weren't supposed to be any, or 3. So, I don't know. I don't feel I'm being treated fairly when I can't sit on my deck at 5 o'clock at night without hearing 14 or 17 bawling beagles next to me. And we're thinking about selling our property, and I think that would also depreciate the value of my property if somebody hears that and decides they don't want to buy it because of the noise. So that's,
I just don't think we should have to put up with listening to that all the time. It's not all the time.
it's off and on, all day.
Yeah.
And I deer hunt a lot, I cut wood a lot, we're both retired, we're both outside all the time, so we hear it all the time. A lot of the other neighbors probably don't hear it because they're not out there. I tried to follow the correct channels without stirring up a lot of neighborhood problems, and that's why I asked him not to do anything the first 2 times. But it's not getting any better, so something needs to be done. If they can totally enclose it and keep the noise at a minimum, that's fine. Otherwise, when I talked to the zoning department today, he said he counted 17 dogs out there, and when he asked Mr. Staples why he was building the addition on the back, he said he was building it there so he didn't have to hear them bark. And that's facing my house. That's it for me, yeah.
Questions from board members?
So would you be on the
I'm on the
east side of that block?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a mile block or is that?
Yes, it is. But there's nothing in between us but bare ground, and beagles sound carries. Trust me, we have 14 beagles within a half a mile of you. Or 17.
And how long did you say you've lived there, sir?
We bought the property 4 years ago, and we waited 2 years to make sure, because the place we moved was so noisy, that's why we moved out there. So we waited 2 years and camped out and spent a lot of time out there and thought, boy, this is the place, you know, and for 1.5 years it was.
And just to
refresh my memory, you filed, was it 2 complaints or 3 complaints?
I've probably called 7 times total. And that's what I've been instructed to do.
Have you noticed any kind of difference since he's put up the temporary?
A little bit, yep, a little bit. But I mean, it's all open on the top, so it all flies right out the top anyway, and then the wind catches it and it's there.
What is the terrain between you like? Is that flat farm field?
Isn't there some tree line in there?
We have a small chunk of woods, yeah, right in between, but as it goes, it's all flat, there's a little bit of trees, and then there's a valley, and then we're right here. So it's a straight shot. I would love to have somebody from the board come out and physically listen to it. I mean, the training part of it, I'm fine, if he wants to train dogs, that's fine. You know, they're gonna bark, and old McDonald's farm dog barks all the time, I'm fine with that. But when you get 17 of them barking at the same time, it carries, and it's annoying.
So would you contend that a kennel would injure the use of your property?
I think it would depreciate the value of my property if we list it to sell and somebody's walking through my woods and hears that and asks me, and I've talked to the real estate agent, I have to disclose the fact that there's a dog kennel over there. And that could possibly keep somebody from buying my property. It would keep me from buying the property because I don't care to hear the barking. That's why I moved where I did.
And is the primary use that you've made of your property for residential purposes?
Sir.
Any other questions from board members?
No, sir. No, that's fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Steve. Staples could come back up, please.
Each of the applicants that applied for kennels were also given a copy of the ordinance 2007-5 that bans requires dogs to be restrained as well as disturbance of the peace, requiring them to be kept quiet by the landowner. Each of these kennels were given a copy of that, as well as Mr. Gregory. I shared that with him on the phone. He did state that he was uneasy having to call the sheriff's department, but this is out of our office's hands. The ordinance was given to the sheriff directly by the commissioners for them to go out and enforce that as they see fit. Yeah, I'm sorry you had trouble with that issue, but restraint and disturbance of the peace are monitored by the sheriff's department.
Just for the sake of clarification, a kennel is for the keeping of four or more dogs, not
yes.
3 or more dogs.
4 or more dogs.
Okay, so just as a point of clarification.
And that's the special exception or the use variance either one.
Okay. Would you have comments, or would you like to respond to the concerns that were raised?
First of all, I've never had more than 14 dogs. I only have 12 runs that I can put dogs in, and 2 of them are house dogs. So I've never had more than 14 dogs. Can't hold that many, don't have room for that many, any more than that. And since the first time when I had the noise complaint, that's when I added the walls up, the no bark deterrent, added a radio out there for them to quit hearing things. I think it's went down drastically. Could be wrong. Because I work all day, so I'm not there during the daytime hours. But as far as when I'm there, it went down drastically. And I knew there was a noise issue with it. That's the reason I added it. That's the reason I want to add the 12 by 40 structure to cover it, insulate it. And it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but that's the reason I want to do that. I've had dogs for almost about 4 years now, so it's never really changed as far as how they bark or anything. I'm not exactly sure why it just came up the last month and a half, but it's there, so I'm trying to take care of it. And as far as building the structure, said that I told him that I was doing it so I didn't have to hear the dogs. That has nothing to do with it. I can step inside my house, I can't even hear them. I was doing it because I knew a neighbor didn't like it. I want to make sure that I can make everybody happy. That's the reason I went around and talked to all the neighbors before I even came in. And I actually did a radius of a half mile. I don't think he's actually in that radius, but if he can hear it, I still want to fix it. I also went, after I found out that I was having noise complaints, I actually went down to the woods that adjoins his property, went down there. I had my wife get the dogs riled up as much as I could just to see if it was, I couldn't even hear them. It's a pretty substantial piece of woods that's in between it, not huge. There's a pretty good noise barrier there, in my opinion. I couldn't hear it myself. And I did it to see if I could hear it, because if I could hear it, then I wanted to make sure it was taken care of right away. My closest neighbor says, yes, I hear him. Doesn't really bother me, says not that loud to me. He's about 1,000 feet away from my house. Substantially closer than anybody else I have. I had several of the folks on here let me know if they needed anything, that they would came in if I needed them to speak up for me. I try to do everything I can I'm a neighborly person. If I can do something for my neighbors, I do.